Well, joining me now here in the studio is Noha Abul-Dahab. She's a professor of international law at Georgetown University and also a non-resident fellow at the Middle East Council on Global Affairs. Good to have you with us. So how much of this is a cause for celebration, the fact that there seems to be a truce deal agreed to?
Yes, well, look, I mean, any relief from the bombing and any sort of release of hostages is, of course, very welcome. However, as we've been seeing throughout today and over the past several weeks, this is not just about Gaza and the 7th of October. It's also about the West Bank. It's really about the belligerent Israeli occupation of Palestinian land. And I think that, so long as there is this narrative and this belief that Israel is exercising its right to self-defense, as its powerful Western allies continue to say, then there will be no sort of meaningful resolution to the ongoing crisis, because there's a complete dismissal of the contextual and structural and historical root cause of the issue. And so this truce, again, while it's extremely important, ultimately, I worry that it will be a Band-Aid solution and that there will be a return to the intensive fighting, as we have seen from the statements made by Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, that the war will continue.
Does a lot of what happens after the four-day truce depend on the position of the US and whether it really wants to see a ceasefire or not?
I think that would be a fair assessment to make, given the powerful influence that the United States has on Israel. But it also, we'll have to see how the negotiations go, how the continued efforts, mediation efforts by Qatar and Egypt and the Americans go in terms of renewing the truce. At the very least, another temporary truce, and to keep renewing that. But there is a very big question mark about ultimately how all of this will be resolved.
Does it strike you the double standards here? We've seen and heard very strong messages from US officials when it came to the war, the Russian war on Ukraine. In this situation, we've had statements from the UN New York Human Rights Office director as he was resigning, Craig Mokaiba, saying on October the 28th, this is a textbook case of genocide. We had on the 16th of October a number of UN experts, 35 UN experts, saying this is genocide in the making. But in this scenario, unlike in Ukraine, the US is sending weapons to the occupier, not to the occupied.
Yes, absolutely. And this, I guess there are two sort of points to make here. One is that the systematic dehumanization of Palestinians for many, 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 many years has resulted in this kind of situation, right? A lot of them are just considered numbers. Dead bodies, yes, but they're just numbers. They're not actual humans. And that has compounded the very sort of unjust U.S. foreign policy when it comes to this conflict. But the second point is the fact that the United States does believe that Israel is exercising its right to self-defense. And there's important context here from a legal perspective. So, the International Court of Justice had issued an advisory opinion in 2004, for example, about the separation wall that Israel built in the occupied Palestinian land. And it said that Israel cannot claim its right to self-defense over territory that it effectively occupies, that it has effective control over. And this also goes for Gaza. Despite the fact that Israel claims that it no longer occupies Gaza since 2005, when it disengaged, it does. And in fact, because it has effective control over the territory.
The 35 UN experts said in their statement, which I was referring to specifically, quote, such egregious violations cannot be justified in the name of self-defense.
Absolutely. Absolutely, they cannot. I mean, it doesn't make sense. If Israel can, turn off the water, inflict a complete siege, and instantly deploy troops into Gaza, that means that it has effective control over the territory. And under international law, it means that it cannot exercise its right to self-defense. It doesn't make sense. However, if Israel is attacked, then it can use law enforcement, for example, to respond to these attacks, but not launch a full-scale war against 14,000 plus, well, over 2 million Palestinians, killing 14,000 plus.
So at this point, what happens the day after this truce ends? Will it be, do we expect an immediate resumption of the bombing campaign? Palestinians have had a few days to breathe and they go back to the slaughter?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it's like you're pressing pause on the systematic and mass killing of Palestinians. So I think that for the families whose loved ones will come back, the Palestinian prisoners and the Israeli hostages, this is good news, the truce, but you're absolutely right. I mean, the question is then what happens? And again, as we've seen from the statements made by the highest level senior officials in the Israeli government, they claim that the fighting will continue, which is why the continued pressure in the United States and from the United States on the Israeli government is absolutely crucial.
All right, thank you so much, Noha, for coming in, sharing your thoughts.